Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fantasy Life Week 6 NFL live stream. I'm Matthew Freedman. He is Chris Allen. Chris, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. I mean, we are now a third of the way through the regular season, and we got another London game. I mean, ton of stuff going on, but I'm ready to get into the chat, ready to see what questions folks have because I probably have a number of questions about my lineups because of injuries and buys and just like the chaos of the season as things normally come. But I'm sure we'll get all of those answered and everybody else's as we go through the show today.
All right. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, the London game kicking off right now. Let me see. Do I have a bet on that game? Fortunately, I do not have a bet on that game. Nothing worse than actually, you know what I do? I'm on the under, but let's not talk about that. Nothing worse than tracking that game while I'm trying to do this show. And Nando, our producer, head of content, putting messages in the back end saying like, "Hey guys, here's what's happening in that game. Freedman, it looks like you're losing your bet right now."
Yeah,
I already know I'm losing my bet without you telling me.
We won though last week. I tailed that, and we got there.
We did. We won by the hook. By 0.5 points, we hit the under on that. So very lucky. Sometimes better to be lucky than good. And as we get through this day, hoping all the best of luck to everyone. All right, let's start to get to the questions here. First one, Ingram or Tucker Kraft. So Evan Ingram coming back from injury, been out for a number of weeks. Tucker Kraft, who has just been awesome as the new number one tight end for the Packers. Chris, where are you going here?
I think I'll go with Tucker Kraft. I think that's the easier play for week 6, not just from the target share that we saw Kraft get in week 5, also the efficiency, like his yards after the catch. Now I get it. I mean, I think his second touchdown was just like a streak down the left sideline. Most of us, one, if we were able to catch the pass, and two, able to just like run afterwards. A lot of us maybe could have scored that touchdown, but either way, I mean, I'll just take the better offensive environment with the Packers going up against the Cardinals this week. I mean, versus the Jaguars. I mean, Ingram coming off the hamstring injury. I'll just take the health situation out of the equation for week 6.
Yeah. So Tucker Kraft, one of the newer tight ends to bust onto the scene. And I think, people lucky to get him on waivers. And then there's a question of like, okay, do I start him or do I start the stud I drafted before the season and now who's maybe underperforming? Which guy do I go with? And I just say sort of like big picture, Tucker Kraft, there aren't all that many tight ends I would start ahead of him. And I would say, Chris, and I like your thoughts on this. Think about like maybe like the big 6 minus Mark Andrews, who's no longer in the big 6. He's been replaced in the big 6 by Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
But, that's just how it works. But the big 6 before the season started, you had George Kittle, Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, obviously on bye this week, but Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Kyle Pitts. I would say those guys and Brock Bowers, those are the guys I'm clearly starting over Tucker Kraft. And 100%. Then we'll add in Jake Ferguson as well.
Sure.
That one's maybe more borderline. But other than that, I think I'm probably going Tucker Kraft versus almost any other tight end you could name. But what are your thoughts on that one?
I think that's the right way to play it. It just by bucketing the tight ends at least through 6 weeks or 5 weeks rather of data, we know are going to be on the upper end of targets per route run, air yards. They're just like they're getting the opportunities that we would need from a tight end in order to at least be in that like top 12 consideration week in and week out. Because I know they're probably going to be questions about like Kyle Pitts and like some of those guys that popped up for good weeks last week. But if you just had to compare them to the guys we've seen so far, like week in and week out, have both the opportunities and the ability to potentially fall into the end zone, I think bucketing them the way that you did it, I think makes the most sense.
All right. Next question here. Let me see. I feel like I just had a question on the board and then went away.
It disappeared.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. All right. Which one are you sitting? Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, or Austin Eckler? Etienne has been something of a disappointment to this point in the season, especially given that Tank Bigsby is now starting to get a larger share of the carries and is being much more productive with those carries. Josh Jacobs, I'm just going to say, I feel like it's hard to sit Josh Jacobs in the offense that he's in. Austin Eckler, we are expecting no Brian Robinson Jr. after Robinson did not practice at all this week. I think Robinson is maybe like technically questionable entering this game, but very much expected he will not play, which means Eckler could get a pretty big boost. So I'm probably sitting Etienne, but that's not like 100%. Where are you on this one?
I think I'm with you on sitting Etienne, and of course, like if they had the choice, that's probably passed right now since well, no, Jaguars aren't playing yet. But either way, I think for just looking at the rushing production or the rushing opportunities across each of the backfield, Etienne is now split, or at least somewhat split, with Tank Bigsby and also the shoulder injury that's knocked him out of a couple of weeks. Austin Eckler, like while he should get a bump in workload with Brian Robinson out, he also has to contend with Jeremy McNichols. And last week, if you signed up for FantasyLife.com, go and check out the utilization report. It highlights the fact that just even last week, Jeremy McNichols was working in on some of the like short down and distance, short yardage type situations that would take away some of the like the key opportunities for a guy like Austin Eckler. Like if they're playing on the goal line, like those types of things where it's just like he punches in a touchdown, it takes away from Austin Eckler. So unless you're in a PPR format, I'm less likely to put him in. Whereas with Josh Jacobs, we know he's getting the majority of the carries. So I think if you just like rank all of the backfields from that standpoint, from an opportunistic standpoint, Jacobs has to grade out as the better of the three.
All right. Urgent, Christian Kirk or Jalen Tolbert. Obviously, this is urgent because we do have that London game kicking off at 9:30. And so that's a good reminder. Nando, producer on the back end. Yeah, let's prioritize the questions that have to do with Jags players just so we can get as many of those going. So yeah, Christian Kirk or Jalen Tolbert. Where are you on this one? I'm probably starting Kirk.
Yeah, I'm with you on Kirk. I mean, target share started like has been back, at least like and hopefully the offense just functions better as a whole with Emmett Ingram also back in the fold this week. So I don't have too much of an issue right now with the defensive matchup, like slightly there for them going up against the Bears. But I think Jaquan Brisker is supposed to be out like in this matchup, like
Yes.
for the Bears. So I think it will make things a bit easier for the Jaguars passing game.
Okay, there we go. Full PPR, Etienne or Chase Brown. Also, do you play Amari Cooper today? Yes, I am playing Cooper today. Of course, I hate myself. So
Yes.
take that with a grain of salt. But yeah. And then the other one was Etienne versus Chase Brown. Where are you looking there?
I think I'll still give the actually thinking about it a bit more, I'll give the nod to Chase Brown in this one. Zach Moss popped up with the ankle injury. I know both of them wound up getting in a full practice like on Friday, but going up against the Giants defense versus Etienne, we don't know when that shoulder injury like may re-aggravate itself, and that's now happened in two straight weeks. For Etienne, I think I'll give Brown the benefit of the doubt here, considering he's like his snaps, usage around the goal line, targets have all been ramping up over the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, this one's close. Man, I probably the slightest lean to Chase Brown, but this one I think is very much a coin flip. All right, Bears or Eagles DST. I gotta say, I almost never look at DSTs in terms of like really looking at the matchups in terms of like fantasy, because like fantasy is pretty much like, is this team going to get sacks?
Right.
That's like a big part of it, or are they going to get turnovers? But Bears versus Eagles. I will just say right now, looking at my rankings, I have Eagles at number 2 and Bears at number 4. I feel like both of these teams have good matchups. Maybe whatever team is going against Deshaun Watson,
Right.
maybe that's where you go. But where are you looking on this one?
I think that's the easy play right there. Deshaun Watson. I think both Watson and Jacoby Brissett were battling for which quarterback would have the highest sack rate, like before Brissett got benched for Drake May. So with that, like with Brissett out of the picture, yeah, I'll just take the defense that's going up against Deshaun Watson. He hasn't, I think it's Deshaun Watson is averaging like 170 passing yards per game. And I think Bo Nix is averaging 173 per game. So like, I'll take the guy that's throwing less and taking more sacks. So yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah. All right. So here we are. Full PPR pick 2, Garrett Wilson, DeAndre Swift, Chris Olave, Tony Pollard. Please and thank you. We appreciate that. All right.
Yeah.
I gotta say, DeAndre Swift, I feel like he's someone I never want to bench at this point, just based on the workload that he's getting.
Yeah.
And Garrett Wilson, I mean, hard to bench him, but Chris Olave as well, someone who is impressive. Pollard, has impressed with efficiency, still splitting a decent chunk of that backfield. Where are you going with this one?
I think it's like the first two. I think with the other two, like I think so the first two, Wilson and who's the other guy?
DeAndre
DeAndre
Swift.
Swift. Yeah, I think both of those set up like they are the workhorses for their team, whether it's the wide receiver one or RB1, like for their respective squad. Chris Olave has Spencer Rattler throwing him the ball
Yeah.
this week. And so while I do think from an arm talent standpoint, Spencer could huck one down the field and get it into Olave, that's a pretty volatile situation. Tony Pollard, though, I think is one of those ones that's like right there on the borderline, has been getting the majority of the work. Going up against the Colts this week that have allowed like their top 5 in running back points allowed. So it's just like I could see him in the mix, but I'll just take the 2 guys that we know have the workload to sustain like an RB1 or wide receiver 1 production.
Yeah, DeAndre Swift, one of the guys I highlighted in my favorites piece this week. And then also, I mean, Garrett Wilson had like 20, 22 targets last week. Like just impossible to bench someone with that kind of target volume. All right, start 3 in PPR. Olave, McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Devontae Smith, and DJ Moore. This is like a fantastic problem to have. In that you have all of these guys available and you need to pick between them. I will say I'm not benching McLaurin. I am not doing that. I want as much exposure to that Commanders offense as possible based on just how explosive and efficient it has been. So he, for me, is just automatically locked in. Devontae Smith, I feel like is also someone I just want to be starting. And then DJ Moore. I feel like it's impossible to bench him as well. So just shooting from the hip, I would say McLaurin, Smith, DJ Moore. I think it's pretty easy to look at Johnson and Olave and say, like, because of the offenses that they are in, you can exclude them. But that's where I would be going. McLaurin, Smith, DJ Moore.
I'm with you there. And so we already talked about Chris Olave and the quarterback situation that kind of already disqualifies him. He'd be the easy one to knock out. And then also for Deontay Johnson, I mean, a couple weeks now, he's popped up like on the injury report, like with an ankle problem. I think it was a groin almost like in week 3 that had him sidelined throughout like part of the game, like back in week 3. So it's like there have been issues, like injury issues popping up here and there for Deontay Johnson. So it's like, I would say that Olave's quarterback situation knocks him out. Deontay Johnson's health or potential injury concern, like during the game, also knocks him out. So just an easy disqualifiers to kind of eliminate some of those guys that would, if all things being equal, would have like wide receiver 1 workloads almost across the board.
Yeah. So I think McLaurin and Moore are the clear guys that you start. And then I think it comes down to Smith versus Johnson. And I lean a little more towards Smith, even though like he doesn't have the full upside of like the workload that Deontay Johnson has potentially coming his way. Like Smith, at home, coming off of the bye, should be super healthy, going against a Browns defense that is missing players and is now on its 3rd straight road game. Like situationally, this is a great spot for the Eagles offense. So I want to have some exposure to that.
Yeah.
All right. Next question here. Hello, full PPR for this week. Please rank Adunze, Downs, Judy, Hopkins. All right. I don't think we've talked about any of these guys yet. Downs very likely has Anthony Richardson coming back. Adunze playing in the London game, but having to compete with targets. Jerry Jeudy in an offense that I really don't want much exposure to. DeAndre Hopkins should be healthier coming out of the bye week, but with an offense that we still don't really feel all that great about with Will Levis at quarterback. What are your thoughts on these guys?
So out of all of those guys, I'll probably go with, oh man, I'll go with Hopkins first out of that group, just from the target share standpoint. Calvin Ridley, or I think even just like Brian Callahan in general, talking about the lack of looks like for Calvin Ridley so far. And so if folks want to take the flip side of that and say it's the squeaky wheel narrative for Ridley and that's why he should be targeted this week, either way, Hopkins going up against like the Colts secondary, who we know have been suspect in terms of allowing like points to wide receiver 1s. I put him up at the top, because Adunze has fallen behind, like some of his like snaps and targets have fallen behind, like with Keenan Allen coming back into the fold. And so that just might be more of an up-tempo match, like for all the Bears, like wide receivers. But I would say it'd be Hopkins, Adunze, Downs with the slight downgrade at quarterback, going from like Joe Flacco to Anthony Richardson, which is like hilarious to say that sentence out loud. But then like finally after that, then Jerry Jeudy, because again, I want no part of that Browns passing game.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, I might lean slightly still towards Josh Downs as the number 1, even with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, just because it is full PPR and he has been targeted pretty heavily. But like,
yeah,
I feel like all of these guys are roughly in a tier together. But I would say I'd go Downs, and then I think I think maybe Hopkins, just because healthy coming out of the bye. Like, I feel
Mhm.
like there's potential more upside with him versus Odunze and Judy, just kind
Yeah.
of based on the situation. So I think I
Yeah.
go Downs, Hopkins, probably Odunze, and then Judy. All
Swap
right.
mine. I'll put Downs up front because yeah, he was even out earning Michael Pittman just this past weekend. Pittman with the potential back injury. I think
Mhm.
I'd put Downs up at the front. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
All right. Najee or Etienne PPR. Yeah, just straightforward. Where are you going with this one?
I think easy, or no, not as easy, but I will still lean towards ETN like in this matchup. Like I know that that's potential like for Jalen Warren to come back like for this week. You still have Justin Fields like taking some rushing production as well, and not that Najee has been playing like as efficiently as we would want given the volume that he's given. So I'll at least give ETN the slight nod here, like even with like Tank Bigsby kind of kicking around in the backfield as well.
Yeah, I think I'm probably gonna go Najee. But it's not like a slam dunk. I think it's
Mhm.
pretty close. Let's just, I mean, I think we've talked about this before on the show. Harris almost certainly is not a good player. Like,
Yeah.
like mediocrity would be an upgrade based on what we've seen out of him to this point. Like 3.9 yards per carry, 4.9 yards per target for his career, but he has 70 yards on 16 opportunities in every game, like at least those numbers. So I feel like he has an elevated floor. Jalen Warren, as you mentioned, cleared from the injury report, almost certainly playing in this game, but Cordell Patterson is out. The Raiders are dealing with some defensive injuries in their front seven. So even if some of those guys for the defense play, like they're not fully healthy, I just
Mhm.
feel like Najee has a really high floor. Etienne, I think, has a pretty low floor. Like there could be a
Fair.
situation where like Bigsby just totally crushes him and Etienne is relegated to a pretty bit role. So yeah, I would go with Harris. I feel he's just a little bit safer, even though like I don't think he's actually all that good of a player. All right, next question here: Eckler or Madison? So two guys who are starting to kind of emerge within their backfields. Eckler returning from injury. Now, no Brian Robinson Jr.,
Mhm.
Alexander Madison, no Zamir White. So Madison, once again, presumably will be the leader in that backfield. Where are you looking?
I'll agree with the start sit tool on this one. Even with the potential split between Eckler and Jerry McNichols, as we noted earlier, again, go check out the utilization report and see how much McNichols was used, even with Brian Robinson in the lineup this past week. But Alexander Madison, I know he'll get the majority of the carries. I mean, but this is like one of the tougher matchups that you can go up against, like going against like the Steelers, like front seven rather. I'll take Eckler's potential workload, but not just as a rusher, but as a pass catcher versus whatever we might see out of Madison and the rest of the group.
Yeah, and I mean that game between the Commanders and Ravens could be a massive shootout.
Uh-huh.
And I just kind of still want exposure to the guy who has the potential to score touchdowns, and then also Eckler as the pass catching back. On a team that's a sizable road underdog, but in a game that could have a lot of points. Eckler could end up having a good number of catches, especially in PPR. That could help. So
Agree.
Eckler is where I would look here. All right, for everyone joining, just the reminder, we will probably not get to all of your questions. We will get to as many of them as is reasonable. But if you have questions left over, check out the free start sit tool that we have at Fantasy Life. Check out the rankings that we have at Fantasy Life. A lot of resources there. Of course, all of the content that is free. Check it out. All right. Hey guys, greetings from Germany. Hey, thanks for watching the
Hey.
show from Germany. All right. Who to start full PPR? Rico Dowdle versus Chase Brown, Ingram versus Ertz, and Lawrence versus Richardson. All right, number of questions there. Let's start with the running backs. Dowdle versus Chase Brown.
I'll still go towards. Actually, take that back. I'll go towards Rico, like in this one. I know Detroit, it can be a tough out, like from a defensive standpoint, but we've seen like Rico Dowdle take over the majority of the work, like from Ezekiel Elliott. Haven't seen much from Deuce Vaughn, Luke Key, like any of the other guys that they were mixing in like the first couple of weeks. So like I still, and also like since you were talking about game environment for the Commanders versus the Ravens, I mean this could potentially be another up tempo like type of matchup between Dallas and the Lions. So I'll invest in that situation for like versus what could be like a potential slog between the Bengals and the Giants without having like Malik Neighbors or Devin Singletary again in week 6. between Ingram and Ertz. I'll go. I'll go Ertz. Honestly, this might be. You might disagree with me on this one, but at least Ertz has been used like from a floor standpoint consistently enough that if you just needed a few points and wanted to get out of there, get out of week 6, I could see you leaning towards Ertz and from that standpoint. And between Lawrence and Richardson, I'll take Lawrence with the potential downgrade in the Bears secondary without having Brisker in the lineup for this one. So I'll at least get, and also having the full complement of weapons back. I will say like Lawrence looked well enough in week 5 that I would trust him in week 6. But where are you thinking on those 3?
I mean, I probably go Anthony Richardson, but I hate myself doing it because I just know, I think he's got a really low floor, really high ceiling, especially coming back from injury and knowing that Joe Flacco has played well behind him. If there is any sort of thing that happens, his shoulder just starts to hurt a little bit, he slides kind of funny, and maybe just his ankle got tweaked a little bit, they will pull him out and put Flacco in. So I feel there's more risk with Anthony Richardson, a little more upside. And so maybe that kind of determines the way that you go in your matchups, whether you need, to go for the ceiling or whether you're going for a floor that's a little more solid. All right. Next question here. Buys and injuries have me in a good spot at running back. Need a dart throw, low ownership running back. Thoughts? Okay. A dart throw, low ownership running back.
I don't even know who are the.
Yeah, I would need to think about this one a little bit.
See if we can come back to that.
Jerry McNichols might be out there in some leagues. And I would say, we've seen him without Eckler. We've seen him with Brian Robinson on the field. And now we have the chance to see him without Brian Robinson. I think he's the kind of 3 down back who has potential to really kind of fill in and give maybe 85%, 90% of the Brian Robinson role. And he still might be out there in a number of situations. What are your thoughts?
I'd toss out him, or maybe see if Ty Johnson or Ray Davis from the Bills are available. So James Cook has yet to practice because of the toe, foot, something along those lines. So maybe one of the Buffalo running backs, and I believe it's been more of Johnson than Davis that have mixed in over Johnson over Davis that's mixed in behind James Cook over the past couple of weeks. So I'd say any one of the backup running backs for the Bills, those also are potential guys that are fairly low roster that you can potentially pick up.
Yeah, agree with that. One more potentially, Tyler Goodson with the Colts. The starting running back there is out. Trey Sermon as the fill-in running back, a little underwhelming, got volume, but wasn't really efficient with it. Tyler Goodson did work in, and if he gets the hot hand, maybe they ride with him a little bit. So those would be some guys that I would think about there. All right, next question. Full PPR. I need one. Rico Dowdle, Trey Sermon, just talked about Rome Odunze, Dowdle, Sermon, Odunze. Where are you thinking?
I'll lean towards Dowdle on this one. Even in full PPR, I have at least some concern about what Odunze's outlook's going to look like with Keenan Allen back to full strength. And then Trey Sermon, to your point, I mean, Goodson did kind of mix in just this past week when it was and neither of them really performed all that well from a rushing perspective. They did have a tough out last week, but still, I mean, they were still from a production standpoint, fairly equal from that standpoint. So I'll give it Dowdle and then Odunze and then Sermon shortly thereafter.
Okay. I will probably go Trey Sermon after Dowdle. So I think I go Dowdle if you're kind of looking for maybe a little bit more of the higher ceiling, because that game at Texas Stadium, or sorry, AT&T Stadium rather, it could shoot out. But Trey Sermon, I think, is likelier to get more opportunities in his game than Dowdle. So if you're just kind of looking for the projectable floor, I would go with Sermon. If you're kind of thinking a little bit more about which of these guys could be in an offense that puts up a lot of points, I would go with Dowdle. All right. Getting a note from the producer. We have a lot of Bucky Irving questions. Cool to talk about him, where we have him ranked, and answer a few questions. Yeah. So Rachaad White, if you're looking at the Buccaneers injury report, let me see exactly what the injury was that he popped up with. Popped up with the foot injury, was limited on Wednesday, and then did not practice Thursday and Friday. Officially doubtful, which means 5% chance that he plays in this game. And then even if he played, very likely that he is not doing much at all. So Bucky Irving, who has been working in consistently anyway, now looks full go to be the guy in this backfield right now. And so in terms of like where we would have him ranked, where we would want to start him, like the players that we would start ahead of him,
Mhm.
there really aren't that many guys that I would want to start ahead of him. But what are your kind of, I would just say like RB2, like very solid RB2
Yes.
is where I have him. Like RB17 right now is where I have him ranked. So like your typical studs, like the guys that are sort of like no doubt starting ahead of him, like your top 12 guys, we really don't need to talk about them. But like I think it's sort of like Najee Harris, Bucky Irving. Like I think
Mhm.
like that caliber of player is where we are generally thinking now about Bucky Irving. Like Rico Daddle, Bucky Irving.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
going Bucky Irving, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Tank Bigsby, I'm going Bucky Irving. You know,
Yeah.
like Chuba, I'm probably going Chuba,
I might
but
go
it's not
Chuba.
like it's not like slam dunk. I'm going Chuba. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like J.K. Dobbins, probably going Dobbins, but
Mhm.
like not 100%. So like that is the general range of where we are with Bucky. All right, two full PPR: Bucky Irving, Garrett Wilson, Brian Thomas Jr. All right, so this is
Ooh.
interesting. You know, have Bucky as the one running back there going against the two wide receivers. You got to start two. I mean, I will say Garrett Wilson just still, I know he hasn't been as productive as we would have wanted. It just still feels like with all of the volume he has coming his direction, it is really hard to bench him in any given week. Uh, Brian Thomas Jr. has been great to
Mhm.
this point, like especially like for a rookie has been great.
Yeah.
But Bucky Irving as the locked in back now for Tampa Bay, it feels really hard also to bench him given all of the volume he could have coming his way. So Wilson and Irving are the two guys that I would be starting there. And then I would just sort of be hoping, let this not be the week that Brian Thomas just absolutely breaks his slate and he's sitting on my bench.
Yeah. I'm hard pressed to try to find more reasons or any reason to bench a guy that just got like what 21 targets
Yeah.
just like last week.
No.
I can't do that, man. So yeah, and with Bucky, like all the points you just laid out, completely agree. I think he's the better start like for this week. Like if we had concerns about like we were talking earlier about like Najee Harris and like his inefficiencies, but like the volume is there. If we already know the efficiency is there for Bucky Irving, like insert like advanced metric here, like comparing Irving to Rashad White, like Bucky was like just almost head and shoulders like better than Rashad White, which is hilarious because he's probably a head and shoulder like shorter than Rashad White.
Yeah.
But I think like if the efficiency is there, the volume is going to be there as well. I think Irving probably grades out as the better option for throughout most folks. And then with BTJ, he's got Evan Ingram coming back this week, so it's like maybe even just like the slightest of ticks like down
Mhm.
for Brian Thomas Jr.
That is a great point about Evan Ingram coming back, who soaked up a lot of targets last year and could certainly hurt the ability for Thomas to get a target share that like is high enough for you to justify benching Bucky Irving. All right, sit one of these guys, Bucky, JMO, or Tracy, Tyrone Tracy. So I would just say shooting from the hip, Devin Singletary, the number one running back for the Giants, was out last week with a groin injury, practiced every day this week, limited fashion for each practice, but did practice every day and is listed questionable. Normally, if a guy practices every day, even if he's limited, he's going to be playing in that game. So I think decent chance Singletary comes back. And if that's the case, as impressive as Tyrone Tracy looked last week, I don't think he is now like slam dunk the number one running back. I think Singletary probably resumes his role, but it's a little bit of a split. So given that I don't think Tracy gets like the full workload,
Mhm.
definitely I'm going with Bucky. And then it's a question of Jameson Williams versus Tracy. And I'm just not benching Jameson Williams at this
No.
point. Like he's got the explosiveness. And then of course, playing as a favorite in a dome against the Cowboys,
Mhm.
who, you know, are injured in the secondary in a game that absolutely could shoot out, has, I believe, 52 points as the total right now. Bucky and JMO are the guys I'm starting. I'm sitting Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. Now, if we got word that Devin Singletary was for sure supposed to be out, that would complicate things. But yeah, he's still listed as questionable. I could have sworn I saw something from a beat reporter saying the expectation was that he was going to be out, but I'll have to double check that, like as we go.
I will
But
say if the expectation is that he is out, then it becomes much closer with Tyrone Tracy versus Jameson Williams.
yeah,
And in that case, I would say like if you want like the locked in higher floor, like the projectable floor, then I would go Tyrone Tracy. if I feel like I have a little more room to kind of free will, then I would go with Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
All right, next question here. Rest of season stash, Vidal or Estime? That's a good question. So Vidal is at least healthy right now. Gus Edwards is out for this week. So we could see Vidal get a little bit of usage. So right now, I would be stashing Vidal in case we actually see him kind of work in more than we might expect with J.K. Dobbins. Estime still returning from injury, probably not playing this week, at least not like locked in that he's playing.
No.
I think he's actually out. So I would go with Vidal because we actually see him on the field right now. And I mean, it would just suck if you pick up Estime instead of Vidal, and then you see Vidal actually get like 40%, 45% of the carries this week. So Vidal's the guy I'm going with.
Yeah, I would go ahead and stash him right now because we're able to get information on him this week. Like we should, at least we're assuming with Gus Edwards going on IR that there should be some level of rotation between Dobbins and Vidal. So we'll get some knowing or like some ability to know whether or not like he's somebody we should stash or somebody that like we should go ahead and kick back to the waiver. So with Estime, you're going to at least have to hold him for this week and into the following week or whenever he gets back to practice and back on the field. So I think just from a strategic standpoint, picking up Vidal now, see what you can see what happens against the Broncos and then go from there.
Yeah. All right. So actually revisiting the Tyrone Tracy question from Dan Dugan, looking like Devin Singletary will be inactive this week. So amazingly, I was wrong. So even then, I'm still probably going Jameson Williams over Tyrone Tracy. But if I'm looking for that locked in floor, then I would consider Tracy. All right. Pick one for full PPR. Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, if he plays, or Romeo Dobbs. What are your thoughts on this one?
I am a sucker for Dobbs because I would almost say that like from a deployment standpoint, like what's the difference between like how they've deployed like Keon Coleman and how like the Packers have deployed like Romeo Dobbs? I'd say that there are some similarities that when they've tried to use him as like the perimeter type receiver, the contested catch type of guy. And I would say that from an efficiency standpoint, Dobbs has been the one to come down and like with the ball in those contested catch situations has been the more productive of the two. And so while he may or may not be in the doghouse or whatever after his like week 5, like whatever was going on, and he decided to go home and he decided to take his ball and go home. I would say like Dobbs would be the one that I would prefer. But if Shakir is active, then he would be the one out of those three that I would play.
So Shakir, given that he plays on Monday Night Football, I think is a pretty significant risk, but the risk is minimized by the fact that you do have Keon Coleman on the bench so that if Shakir is out, you can plug Keon Coleman in. That said, I would rather have Dobbs over Keon Coleman. So then it just becomes a question of like, how likely is Shakir to sit out? Or even if Shakir plays, how likely is he to have like the full role that he had previous to his injury? Shakir did not practice the first 2 sessions, then had limited practice on Saturday, officially listed questionable. I would probably go with Dobbs, but I think some of it really just depends on your matchup and like how fine you think you are if Shakir is unable to go. If Shakir is unable to go and you're planning on starting him and it's like, oh no, I have to go with Keon Coleman, then I would just say avoid that situation entirely and go with Dobbs. But if you have a little more of ability to kind of take the risk, then I would say go with that.
Yeah.
All right. Bigsby or Chase Brown? Bigsby has looked amazing to this point. Now that has to regress at some point, but he could at this point really be the number one back for that team. Chase Brown, where are you going?
I'll go towards I'll play the homer in this one. And I'll lean towards Chase Brown. I think more because of the potential for re-aggravation for the injury to Zach Moss with the ankle problem that he sustained in last week's game, but with Brown also taking not just some of the passing down work, also like mixing in like in the goal line. We've seen him really ascend into that, like I'll say just RB1B, like from a 1-2 to a 1B. Like I'll say that's where Brown is at. I want to say he's completely taken over for him, but in either case, like I would lean a bit more towards Brown. And to your point, like with Tank Bigsby. I mean, yeah, he was ripping off like long runs. Like we would expect that to regress. Let's see if Etienne can actually get through a full game without having to sit out multiple series because of the shoulder injury. I mean, that at least kind of leaves Bigsby's opportunity up in the air from that standpoint. So I guess I would kind of lean towards Chase Brown. But again, I will completely cop to the fact that I am a Cincinnati homer.
All right. Morning, guys. Good morning. All right. Pick 2, half PPR. Gibson, Tracy, Madison, Chase Brown, Downs, Tolbert, Slayton. Go on. That's a number of guys there.
Yeah.
To think about. I would say Gibson is someone that well, man, I don't know. I have to put all these into the start sit tool, to be honest, thinking about this now.
I'm on it.
Where are you? Yeah.
So I think let's just go by process of elimination, because if I'm looking at this and thinking about guys that like could or could not like wind up like being like the workhorses for like their particular team, I mean, it just doesn't, like Madison is an easy one that like, even though like he will be like the workhorse for his team, like those are guys that like that's a team that I'm not trying to really invest in. So I think he would probably like wind up being out. Like Tolbert, I think, is okay, but not the wide receiver one for his team. So even in an up-tempo matchup against the Lions, he's also kind of out for me. Who else am I missing here?
Slayton. So I would say, yeah, Tolbert out, Slayton out.
Slayton out, yep.
Madison, I think, out. Brown, I think Chase Brown is probably in. And then it's a question of Dowdle, Tyrone Tracy, Antonio Gibson. I'm going to say Gibson out. That game that he's in has a total of 37.5. Not likely you see all that many points. And the Patriots are underdogs. So then I think it's Tyrone Tracy versus Rico Dowdle. And I'm probably going towards Dowdle in that spot. At home in a game that could shoot out with a 52.5 point total. I'm going with Brown and going with Dowdle.
I think I'm with that. I think we disagree with the tool. We both disagree with the tool. We agree to disagree with the tool.
All right. So the next question here, Dobbins or Chase Brown? And so J.K. Dobbins coming off of the bye should be pretty healthy. And then no Gus Edwards is a big deal for him. And then Chase Brown on the other side. We've talked about Brown in a number of questions to this point. Zach Moss will be playing in this game. And so Brown will still have to deal with him. I lean towards Dobbins. Where are you?
I think I'll go towards Dobbins. I mean, both are like fairly bad matchups. I think the Broncos are bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to running backs so far. The Giants like aren't too far behind them. They're also like below average in fantasy points allowed. So it's not like you're really getting a bump in like the matchup like for the Bengals. You attack them more like through the air. So I would go towards Dobbins, the guy that we know is probably going to get more of the workload compared to Chase Brown, with Zach Moss like still being active. So like I think it's Dobbins here.
Okay. Next question. Oh, thanks, guys. You are welcome, Daniel Lewis. All right. Next question here. Kyle Pitts or Tucker Kraft? All right. So I think it was maybe the first question of the show. We had the question of Tucker Kraft versus, I don't even remember who it was. And so the question was Tucker Kraft as this kind of newer tight end that we are getting accustomed to as someone who's kind of like in that weekly must start situation, but like someone that we're thinking about consistently in the top 12, where you would have him. I have Kyle Pitts at 6 this week, Tucker Kraft at 7. So neck and neck. I guess I'm going Kyle Pitts, but man, I hate myself for saying that. And even just like thinking about it more, it's like, which one of these guys brings me more joy? And which one of these guys is likelier to bring me immense sadness? It just feels like Kyle Pitts is the likelier to bring me sadness. But I still have him ranked just a smidgen higher. Where are you on these two?
Yeah, so that's the thing. I understand like going back towards Pitts like in this matchup. I mean, targets were up just this past week. I mean, like everything that you'd want to see, at least from the like the underlying metrics that could at least speak to the fact that he's like regaining that tight end role that we would want from him from a fantasy standpoint. Like I get it. So, and also that he's got the matchup too, going against the Panthers. I mean, we want everybody like against the Panthers this week. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure people are going to have Tyler Algier in their lineup because they're playing the Panthers. So it's just like, I get it. Even with Tucker Kraft's efficiency, being able to create after the catch, also in a good environment going against the Cardinals. I think Pitts is probably the better option.
All right, here's a follow-up question on this. But first a little context. So the way that I do rankings, it tends to be more focused on like median outcome versus like range of outcomes, like downside, upside. And I feel like median outcome, because of the great matchup that you mentioned that Pitts has against the Panthers, I feel like he is likelier to have the higher median outcome versus Tucker Kraft going against the Cardinals. Not that there's a lot of respect for the Cardinals defense, but Budda Baker, pretty good safety that Tucker Kraft would have to go against. Pitts, I feel like, has the lower floor potentially,
Yes.
like the lower the downside, right? Like Pitts could do absolutely nothing in this game. And I think if you're thinking of upside, which one of these guys is likelier to go all the way off? It feels like Tucker Kraft. It just doesn't feel like Kyle Pitts actually has that within his range of outcomes anymore. But
Yeah.
maybe that's just me having been burned on Pitts, like with everyone being burned with
Everybody.
Pitts to this point.
Join the club.
What are your thoughts on kind of the range of outcomes that we can see between those two guys?
And I think that that's exactly the way that folks should be thinking about it, is how try and band their potential production in that environment. And if we're already thinking about almost think about what happened last week. So Kirk Cousins throws for over 500 yards. Kyle Pitts gets 88 of those yards, which isn't a ton compared to Darnell Mooney and Drake London. But still, if this is another potential matchup where Kirk Cousins could throw for well over 300 yards, then that at least lifts his median outcome for this game. Whereas with Tucker Kraft, you are getting Dobbs back. Let's see if Wicks, the flop lag on Dontavian Wicks actually happens this week and he doesn't drop 2 passes or something along those lines that would also take production away from Tucker Kraft. That's where, again, his median outcome could be just slightly lower given the addition of Dobbs, the hope for the increased efficiency for Wicks. So I can just see it working a bit more in Pitts' favor than Tucker Kraft.
All right, chat, help me beat my boss this week. Yes, this is incredibly important. Got to beat the boss. Mixon or Eckler in PPR. Talked about Eckler, who could have an expanded workload this week with Brian Robinson Jr. Very strongly expected to be out. Mixon, there have been questions for weeks as is this the week that Joe Mixon is finally returning to action? If you look at the Texans injury report earlier, it wasn't so certain that we actually would see Mixon this week. Now it's looking much more positive that we will. He did not practice on Wednesday, but did get in limited sessions on Thursday and Friday ahead of his questionable tag. So it seems trending positive. Mixon will play this week. And so if we are assuming that is the case, then I think pretty strongly go with Mixon. Going against a Patriots defense that is missing players. The Texans favored by 6.5. So it could be a sort of establish the running game type of situation where Mixon, even though he's coming back from injury, Mixon could have 15 to 20 opportunities in this game without them really needing to go out of their way to get him his touches. With that kind of workload, I think it would be very hard not to go with Mixon. But what are your thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right in the evaluating the situation. And it's not here's another layer to it, because when Mixon has been out these past 2-3 weeks, it's been Cam Akers, who performed inefficiently enough that they brought in Dario Ngwale, JJ Taylor. I mean, they multiple options were mixing in for the Texans. And for Austin Eckler, it was, Brian Robinson started to come up with this knee thing. It's not like the Commanders instantly handed over the reins to Eckler he was back in LA with the Chargers. Jerry McNichols was mixing in. So it's most of those guys that have replaced Joe Mixon have performed at least to the point where they probably want Mixon back into the lineup, because Mixon at least was up there in terms of rushing efficiency, so on and so forth. So I could see Mixon taking on a majority of the carries and also the receiving work as well. Whereas with Eckler, we already know that his potential opportunities are capped from that standpoint, because McNichols being playing so well in the spot starts that we've seen him in.
All right, so we are about halfway through the live stream here. I'm Freedman. He's Chris Allen. We are taking your questions for week 6 fantasy football. By the way, 0-0, the London game. About 5 minutes left in the first quarter. Looking good once again for everyone who bet the under. All right. Next question here. Josh Downs or Dontavian Wicks. All right. And this is the first Dontavian Wicks question we have gotten this week.
I'm surprised.
Last week, I felt like it was just the Dontavian Wicks live stream. Just a ton of Dontavian Wicks questions. And I think the answer was like, you're starting this guy everywhere.
Yeah.
And
he did terrible.
He went out and really showed us that we know nothing. Dontavian Wicks, I mean, man, painful. But I feel like this is the bounce back spot. Like, not much is really different. Romeo Doubs is back. So, of course, that means, in theory, fewer targets to go around for Dontavian Wicks. But Wicks still had opportunities last week. He was still pretty close to having a big game. The question here from Ron Berner, it feels coin flippy. So curious to your thoughts. Dontavian Wicks versus Josh Downs. Where are you leaning in this one, Chris?
I will lean towards Josh Downs. I mean, for the points that you just made, I mean, Downs was already he was out earning Michael Pittman from a target share standpoint. I think over their 2 games with Downs back, Downs had 21 targets to Michael Pittman's 17. And with this week, I know that Pittman's coming in with a back injury. They are switching back to Anthony Richardson, but I'll just take the guy that I can see having at least more projectable targets in this matchup. Whereas with Wicks, I mean, you already said it. I mean, Dobbs coming back, Tucker Kraft, playing well. I mean, so there are other potential, we haven't heard anything about Christian Watson also coming back for this game as well. So there are multiple options for the Packers, fewer options for the Colts. I think it's just easier to go towards Josh Downs for week 6.
So right now, I have Dontavian Wicks at 30 and Josh Downs at number 31.
Whew.
So it literally for me does not get any closer than this. I think I'm leaning Dontavian Wicks if you need more upside. Yeah. Josh Downs if you're looking for a higher floor, but very close. And by the way, I will update projections after this show, update rankings after the show. And a number of the other rankers are doing the exact same thing as we get more information coming out from beat reporters, from national reporters about who's in, who's out. Coaches may be saying something about workload or anything like that. We will be adjusting the rankings all the way up to kickoff. So be sure, again, to revisit our rankings, revisit our start sit tool. All right. A question here. Pick one PPR. Downs, Cooper, Sermon, Wicks, Shaheed. Oh, man. Tough to parse through this. And Park is there are 5 of them, but also some good names in here and names that in general I would not want to be benching. Where are you on this in terms of thinking about Josh Downs? We've talked about him a number of times. Amari Cooper getting volume, had a minimum of 8 targets in every game, has disappointed in 4 of those games, but still someone who's getting the volume. Trey Sermon, good projectable volume this week. With the number 1 running back there, Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis out. Dontavian Wicks, we just talked about him. And then Rashid Shaheed, haven't talked about him. Has been, a great surprise to this point in the season, but then now has the backup or / third string quarterback throwing to him with Derek Carr out. Where are you looking for these 5 guys, knowing you're picking just one?
I'll go with Amari Cooper out of that group. I mean, Shaheed and Cooper, they win in similar ways where if there's going to be if they're going to win, it's going to be down the field. It's going to be on an explosive gain, from that standpoint. So if I'm going to trust Spencer Rattler versus Deshaun Watson, at least I'll go with Watson because we've seen it a couple of times before and they've missed on a couple of those type of deep bombs earlier in the season. So I think out of that group, I think Cooper's probably the easiest to say that the opportunity has been there. The quarterback, if they can just get on the same page, that should potentially be there. And then also the Eagles matchup, not as much of a downgrade, at least for perimeter wide receivers that you would expect. So I'll give the edge to Cooper out of this group, but awesome names to have to pick between.
Yeah. Amari Cooper, 47 targets in 5 games. It is hard to find a wide receiver who has the volume like that and 8 targets in every game to find that that high of volume and then that consistent of volume. Obviously the quarterback, the offensive situation is not good. But they are getting back Jack Conklin this week. And so they have both of their starting tackles. Maybe that makes a difference to how the offense functions. And as you mentioned, the matchup. Yeah, the Eagles are number 32 in defensive pass DVOA against number 1 wide receivers. It really does not get better in terms of matchup than this. All right. Good morning, gents. Hurts or Love this week? So we haven't had too many quarterback questions. You have Jalen Hurts coming back from injury. He now has his full complement of weapons there. Right tackle Lane Johnson is back. Both of his starting wide receivers are back. Again, coming off of the bye, he should be fully healthy going against a Browns defense. I mentioned this earlier in the show, a Browns defense playing its 3rd straight road game. Situationally, this is a great spot for Jalen Hurts. And I would just say bigger picture, even outside of just thinking about this week, this game, this feels like a buy low spot for all of the Eagles and potentially like Jalen Hurts for like, he's not going to win MVP, right? But like Jalen Hurts for MVP, if you are kind of inclined thinking about, you know what, even though the Eagles could easily be 0-4 to this point in the year, they are not as bad as their record. And potentially from here, they start to go on a run. Jalen Hurts in that market could be someone who's interesting because I just think that he is not as bad as he has looked the past few weeks, given all the injuries around him. So Jalen Hurts is where I'm looking. What are your thoughts here, Chris?
I'm completely with you. I think this would be like, especially coming off the bye, enough time to get like their wide receivers like returning from injury back in sync with the rest of the offense. Like this should be like one of those where Hurts has 300 plus yards passing and maybe like 50 yards in a touch, like from a rushing standpoint. Like we could see like Hurts like really get into like the overall like QB1, like maybe like Lamar Jackson will give him like literally a run for his money, like going up against the Commanders. But in either case, like the defensive matchup, the rest that they've been able to have like with the bye week all sets up for Hurts to be like the better option, at least compared to Jordan Love, who I think is an excellent quarterback to compare against. And you can see in our like the rankings and tiers right now, Love at the top of tier 2, Hurts at the bottom of tier. They're just sitting neck and neck.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a tough question to ask, so we get it. But I will just give the situation to Jalen Hurts right now.
Yeah, they're neck and neck. And I will say, if you go with Jordan Love, I don't think that is like obviously the wrong decision. He's number 2 with 291 yards passing per game. At home, the Packers are just dominant. And they've been that way for years. Head coach Matt LaFleur, 29-17 against the spread, 35-11 on the money line. Like this team just outperforms the betting market expectations at home consistently. And so like this is their smash spot going against the Cardinals defense that is number 32, dead last in the league in drop back success rate. So I think like Jordan Love will have the opportunity in this game just to pick the defense apart going down the field. But again, Jalen Hurts coming off the bye, slight lean towards him, but hard to go wrong, I think, with either way that you go.
Yeah.
Justin Fields or Anthony Richardson. Another quarterback question here. Justin Fields, this is an interesting situation. Like a couple of weeks ago, when the Steelers were 3-0, it looked like, oh, everything is going right for Justin Fields. There's no way Russell Wilson gets the starting job back. Now the Steelers have lost 2 games in a row. Russell Wilson, all of a sudden, practicing in full this week, will be active for this game, entering as the backup. But I mean, that means, in my opinion, that Justin Fields is on a very short runway here. Like he needs to take the plane off quickly in order for it to fly. And I just do not have full confidence that he does that. And so even though Justin Fields, I think, has a ton of upside, I think there's also some big downside with him just in terms of the possibility for getting benched in the middle of the game. Anthony Richardson, obviously we have him lower rated, but I think it kind of depends on like what kind of risk are you looking to avoid? So that's the way that I would be thinking about this. I would like, I know I have Justin Fields ranked ahead of Anthony Richardson, but if you are at all concerned about the possibility of Justin Fields being benched, then I think you kind of try to avoid that risk and you go with Anthony Richardson. That said, Richardson obviously on his own carries significant risk. It's injury risk. It's a different kind of risk.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's a different kind. It's a health benching, not like a
Yes.
coach's decision to bench you. I would say that I'd lean towards Fields, and there's more from the game environment. Like
Mhm.
Tennessee is bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to the to quarterbacks, and that's after facing like some fairly legitimate like quarterbacks like so far. I mean, they while they faced Jaden Daniels in his first start, not Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams in his first start. Then it was Aaron Rodgers, Jordan, Malik Willis, and then like Skylar Thompson. So it's like, yeah, take that with a grain of salt. But bottom 10 like the Titans, but the Raiders are top 10 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. So it's like Fields gets the defensive matchup bump, I would say. But yeah, I completely agree with the potential risk for him being benched like during the game.
All right, another QB question here. Start Dak or Cousins? So Dak at home in a game that could absolutely shoot out is in a very nice situation. Now, granted, he doesn't have all of his weapons. His offensive line isn't as good as it used to be, but we have a pretty good sense of what Dak is capable of in this game. Of course, you also have Kirk Cousins, who looked awesome last week, now has 3 extra days of rest coming off of his primetime performance, going against a Panthers defense that is extremely vulnerable. Kirk Cousins was one of the guys that I highlighted this week in my Freedman's Favorites piece. Just looking, okay, we know how bad the Panthers defense is, but it's just worth noting they will be without key players at all 3 levels of the defense. Derek Brown, Shaq Green Thompson, Jordan Fuller, all week 1 starters, all on IR. And then, of course, questions about Jadeveon Clowney and linebacker Josie Jewell, how healthy they are. And then number 31 in defensive dropback success rate. Kirk Cousins getting better every week. I feel like there's still the potential for Cousins to underwhelm at some points in the future just based on mobility issues. Like he has looked great to this point, but what happens when he faces a defense that can actually pressure him and make him have to move off of his spot? The thing is, that's not happening this week. So not worried about it this week, but just kind of long-term, that is something we will have to see. This week, I'm still going towards Dak, but like with full knowledge that Kirk Cousins was awesome and should be started in a lot of situations this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if you wanted to look at the potential upside for Dak, I mean, let's assume that they're going to be put in a negative game script type situation. It's going to force them to take to the air even more so than they have so far throughout this season. And it's not like their weapons are completely limited to just CeeDee Lamb. We've seen Jalen Tolbert like work in as an ancillary receiver. Of course, they got Jake Ferguson. Rico Dowdle has also been catching some targets as well. So it's like you've got CeeDee Lamb doing his thing, like being like the wide receiver when we expect him to. But Dak has enough like playmakers around him that they should be able to fight back. Like should Detroit get up, which we're expecting them to. But for Kirk, I mean, the Panthers, they are allowing like the 12th most like passing yards allowed like per game like so far this season, around like 215, 216, somewhere in there. But like we're looking at the upside, like in like from a matchup standpoint, where it's like the Falcons could get up, and how are the Panthers going to strike back? I mean, the Falcons secondary, like, and their defense has been playing like fairly stout, like so far, and with some potential for like we already noted, like Deontay Johnson like has been banged up. Xavier Legette has also like been nursing a shoulder injury from last week. So it's just like they're not at full strength either. So it could be one of those like down type of slog type of matchups. Whereas for Cowboys in Detroit, it should be full systems go. So I think you're right to give Prescott the edge here.
All right. And then from Bulldog, appreciate the detailed answers, guys. Smash the like button. Yes. Thank you very much. Wish for everyone to smash the like button. I forget as the host, I forget to be like, hey, everyone, smash the like button. Help us with the algo, but please do that. All right. We are an hour into this. We have 30 minutes left for everyone who's joining us. I'm Freedman. He's Chris Allen, and we are going through all of your fantasy football questions within reason. We're not going to get to all of them, but when we don't get to all of them, check out the rankings that we have for free on the site. Check out the start sit tool that we have for free on the site. And of course, all the content that we have there. I have my pieces. Chris has a fantastic wide receiver cornerback matchup piece. Lots of other content people should check out. All right. Superflex, Richardson or Rattler. oh man.
Wow. How the mighty have fallen.
This is the sign of like how tilted people are with Anthony Richardson right now, of just like, okay, when he's been on the field, he hasn't been as productive as we would have wanted, and he hasn't been on the field because of injury. And Joe Flacco has looked better than him. It's just like maximum tilting
Yes.
with the Richardson crowd. That said, I'm going with Anthony Richardson. I have very little faith in Spencer Rattler. I don't have much faith in Richardson, but more faith in him than Spencer Rattler.
I think that's where I'm at as well. And I'm pulling up the Saints injury report like real quick just to see. Cesar Ruiz like still out for this week, so that's one O lineman that's down. Lucas Patrick, another one of the O linemen, DNP throughout the week. So you got the backup quarterback with potentially 2 starting linemen going to be out for them against Todd Bowles, who is like when when he played against Jaden Daniels in week 1, Todd Bowles blitzed on over 30% of like Daniels dropbacks. When he played against who was it? Bo Nix in week 3, over 30% of the team's dropbacks he was blitzing. I would assume the same. It's almost like how much coaches respect you. You can see it in how much they blitz you, right? So I can see the same thing happening for the Bucks, like going up against like the Saints this week. And could Spencer Rattler uncork one to the Rashid Shaheed like somewhere down the field? Absolutely. But from an overall standpoint, like we know what Richardson can do on the ground. We know it, like he can also do the same to Alec Pierce, like downfield. So it's like, I'll give the lean like to Richardson.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, like, as a general heuristic, not the rookie quarterback making his first NFL start. Like, I want to avoid like the supreme downside of that situation. Unless it's like a guy who's a top 2 pick. But and your point especially is well taken. Left guard out. Your starting center, Eric McCoy, on IR. So he's out, and then missing your right guard as well. So a rookie quarterback making his first start without his 3 interior starting linemen just feels like a massive recipe for disaster. Definitely want to avoid that downside risk. All right, full PPR flex. Cook, who we haven't talked about, playing on Monday Night Football, or Wan'Dale Robinson. The Wan'Dale Robinson question is interesting because I would say normally I'm not that interested in Wan'Dale, but full PPR, you got to take that into account given all of the target volume that he has coming his way, especially because Malik Neighbors out for a second straight week with the concussion issue versus James Cook, who has had his moments, but has a very tough matchup going against a Jets defense. I'm probably going with Wan'Dale Robinson. It feels a little bit disgusting to say that, but full PPR with the target volume that he has, it's such a high floor. I think I'm going with Robinson here.
I would definitely go with Robinson here. Full PPR. And now for context, like our start sit tool like only has like a half point PPR, but even in this setting, it's recommending like having Robinson in there. In week 5, like Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton, they combined for over 70% of like Daniel Jones's targets, which again is Daniel Jones. Like what's his target like really worth? Like I get it, but like over 70% of his targets and over 90% of the team's air yards, the 2 of them together. So it's like, even if like Wan'Dale is like kind of the poster child like for PPR scam, if you're getting the volume like over 20% of the targets like last week, I would, and going up against the Bengals secondary, you're starting Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah, and like is the sign of how much I think you should be starting Wan'Dale Robinson. Like I have very little interest in him. And I still talked about him in my Freedman's favorites piece for wide receivers this week. So it's just like, and then you take into account the matchup as well. Bengals number 29 in defensive dropback EPA. And I think, let me look at this here. Mike Hilton, he did practice in full this week, but is listed questionable, was out last week. So going against a slot corner who is not at full strength, that feels just like a really good situation for Wan'Dale Robinson. All right, the next question here, pick 2 of these guys. Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Tyrone Tracy. We've talked about all of these guys to this point. With Devin Singletary almost certainly being out, Tyrone Tracy once again would be expected to be the lead back for the Giants. Deontay Johnson didn't produce last week, but still been the number 1 guy there with Andy Dalton. And then Terry McLaurin, disappointed in weeks 1 and 2, but since then has just been absolutely awesome. Leads the league in air yards share. Absolutely not benching Terry McLaurin. He's like the one that I'm just locking in. And this point, it's a decision between Tyrone Tracy and Deontay Johnson. I would I would actually lean a little bit towards Tyrone Tracy. Maybe this is just like, if you want the projectable volume, you're going with a running back. If you want more of the upside, maybe you go with the wide receiver, but I lean towards Tyrone Tracy
As the one to leave out of that group?
as the one that I'm starting.
As the one that you're starting? Yeah,
Yeah.
I can go with that. Because like with McLaurin, I think the upside is definitely there. I mean, the Ravens, they're actually allowed like the second most like fantasy points allowed like to wide receivers. But I would say like if you want the projectable volume, you can still get the same upside with Tyrone Tracy going up against the Bengals defense, like for all the points you laid out earlier. So it's like I'm with you on that one. So yeah, I would go Tyrone Tracy there.
All right. The London game is now in the second quarter. Still 3-0, the Jags. The live under is 35.5. Looking good for the people who bet the pregame number there. All right. Flex two of these guys. Dontavian Wicks, Darius Slayton, Michael Wilson. Haven't talked about him yet. Jalen Tolbert. Tolbert, we talked about him. Interesting in that he did have the big game, can have a lot of volume coming his way in a high scoring game in a dome, going against a defense that is still not anywhere close to where it probably will be at the end of the season, but a reconstructed secondary with 3 new starting cornerbacks and Brian Branch moving from slot to safety. So like 4 guys playing like a new role, or just like new to that defense in the secondary in general. What are your thoughts on Wicks, Slayton, Wilson, Tolbert?
Out of the two, I would go ahead and I would flex. Tolbert would be one of them. 26% of the targets just this past week. And if you, again, go and check out the utilization report, the utilization score that Dwayne like McFarland puts out like on a week-to-week basis, like his 1 week score was like a 9.1, and that's like in wide receiver 1 territory, like from a usage standpoint. In terms of like the play action targets, like where he was being used on the field, like taking into context, like all of the things that he was doing just this past week, I would highlight like Tolbert as one of the guys. And then Wicks, I mean, just from a game theory standpoint, and like also the matchup that we're looking at for them, I would put them in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Tolbert, Wicks, and Slayton are close. The one guy I'm really not considering is Michael Wilson.
Yeah.
Wicks and Slayton feel kind of like versions of each other, and that there's this boom bust factor. And really, you could say the same with Tolbert, but I think Tolbert, like we've at least sort of seen it with him recently in a new situation. But yeah, I'm probably going Tolbert and Wicks, but Slayton, he's not someone I easily discard. I think it's a situation where you think it through with Wicks and Slayton.
Yeah.
All right. Half PPR, need to bench one of them. Moss, Chase Brown, Slayton, McConkey. Okay. So we're starting 3 of these guys. I think the one that you're benching is either Moss or Chase Brown. I don't think you're starting both of them, although you just want to go full on against the Giants defense. But like the Giants defensive line is actually kind of decent. Like I think you're just picking one of these guys that you want. Which one are you picking to start between Zach Moss and Chase Brown?
I would lean towards Chase Brown. We don't have the same injury concerns, even though Chase Brown popped up on the injury report with a quad injury on Thursday, but still got in the full practice on Friday. So yeah, I would say it's probably Moss out of that group that I would probably sit, because I just couldn't see myself starting both Bengals running backs. Like if I somehow had a team that had like multiple Bengals wide receivers, okay, sure. But both Bengals running backs, like nah, I can't do that.
Yeah. Chase Brown is probably the guy I'm starting. So sitting Zach Moss. All right. Full PPR, Braylon Allen or Allen Lazard. This is a great question here. It's sort of like this is peak week 6, and it's like Monday Night Football is coming at me. I am probably going with Allen Lazard. Just because I feel like I have a sense of like the target volume he's going to get. Braylon Allen is still having to split the backfield. Not the number 1 guy at all there, although he has looked, I think, just as impressive, if not more impressive, than the guy playing ahead of him. But I in general don't want to be starting like number 2 running backs like on their own team if I can avoid it. Allen Lazard, full PPR is the way that I would go.
Yeah, and also like Lazard has been getting like red zone targets. He has been the one that's been like not favored in the slot, but he has been earning like a few more like targets like from the interior, those layup targets that we were hoping Garrett Wilson would get a bit more. So yeah, I would say out of those two, I mean, I would take Alan Lazard, but we don't know what Todd Downing is going to do now that they've handed the reins over to him.
That's a good point. We don't know what's going to happen with that offense. All right. Question here. Need help with the flex. Tolbert, Javonte Williams, Dowdle, or Tucker. Here is a question. Maybe Nando, we can get some clarification from Jose. I'm assuming that this is Tucker Kraft, but
Yeah.
it might be Trey Tucker.
Oh yeah, wide receiver for the Raiders. Yeah.
Because given the Raiders situation, no Devontae Adams. He's out once again.
Jacoby Myers questionable.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers is questionable. Did not practice on Wednesday and Thursday. Got in a limited practice on Friday, but like I feel like he's a true questionable. So then it's this question of if those two guys are out, Trey Tucker conceivably the number one wide receiver on that team at this point. So normally I wouldn't be thinking Trey Tucker, but maybe I'm just not sure if it's Trey Tucker or Tucker Kraft. But anyway,
sure.
Let's assume that it's I don't know which one should we assume. It doesn't matter. Tolbert, Javonte Williams, Rico Dowdle, or let's say Tucker Kraft. Out of those, who would you be starting?
I would either one of the Dallas guys. I mean, Javonte Williams hasn't seen like more than 50% of the team's carries since like it's been twice over the past like couple of weeks, but he's still battling with Jaleel McLaughlin like for receiving work. So I'd say either one of the Dallas guys. I'd probably lean towards Tolbert, but you can make a case for Dowdle. But I just pick one of the Dallas guys in my opinion.
Okay. I'm leaning towards Dowdle. I think just the projectable volume. All right, standard scoring, need to. So standard scoring, a little bit different in terms of how you have to think about it, but need to, Tank Dell, Chris Godwin, Zay Flowers. So going all wide receivers here. No boost for PPR. So that hurts a little bit, but still thinking through these guys. Chris Godwin, obviously, like the situation in terms of like the volume that he gets. He's playing in the slot. Marshawn Lattimore, this is the sort of like wonderful game we get 2 times a year when Marshawn Lattimore blankets Mike Evans, and those two guys both end up getting kicked out of the game because they fight. But if Lattimore is blanketing Evans, then I think Godwin probably gets a target boost. Zay Flowers, intriguing in a game that could be really high scoring. I like the matchup he has going against the Commanders, but at the same time, you have the Ravens as pretty big home favorites. They might not be throwing the ball all that much. Tank Dell, I think it's a really big boost now that Nico Collins is out. And Tank Dell was someone I was already looking to acquire anyway, because I think he's very talented. Just hasn't been utilized as optimally within that offense. He can play inside, can play outside. What are your thoughts on these three guys?
It's Zay Flowers, or like give me the wide receiver one, like going up against the Commanders. I mean, the last like minus the Browns like complete implosion like last week. Marvin Harrison Jr. was 645 and 1. Jamar Chase was what was Jamar Chase like sitting at? Oh yeah, 7 for 118 and 2 against the Commanders, and also T Higgins mixing in. And then of course like Malik Neighbors went off against them in week 3. So it's like, I'll take the guy that's also earning downfield targets from Lamar Jackson, also going up against like the Commanders secondary. So like I think it's Zay Flowers, like without too much hesitation there.
Yeah. So Flowers has seen 10 plus targets in an NFL high 3 games so far. So even though he's in a run heavy offense, when he gets targeted, when they do go into the passing game, he is the guy getting the targets. The Commanders, number 4 in most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. He's definitely a guy that I would be looking to start in this spot. And then Godwin, I would also want to start. So Tank Dell, even though I love him, probably out of those 3, he's the one that I am benching. All right, Tony Pollard or Tyrone Tracy. So Tyrone Tracy presumably will be the lead back once again, with Devin Singletary looking likelier than not to be out for a second week. Tony Pollard, someone who has been throughout the years really intriguing and then disappointing and then now kind of intriguing again. And we will see if he can really maintain the control of that backfield. But where are you leaning between Tyrone Tracy with Singletary out, and Tony Pollard?
I would lean towards Tony Pollard, like in this game, and this is more for. I mean, both should see like the majority of the work. Both should wind up seeing both are in advantageous matchups. But I would say that at least for like, I'm assuming this is the case. I can see the Titans moving the ball against the Colts easier than the Giants moving the ball against the Bengals. Because without having Malik Neighbors, I do have some concerns about like how often they're going to get into the red zone. Whereas with Levis going up against the Colts, I mean, this is an offense that is now like buckled under the pressure, like against like pretty much every single team that they've come across. So I could see like where Pollard has like multiple shots on goal or like playing in the red zone more often than Tyrone Tracy. So I give the edge to Pollard here.
Okay. So, 100% with you there. By the way, Cole Kmet scored a touchdown, 7-3 in the London game. The live under is now, 40.5. So still some value. All right. Chris, what do you have in the cup? Show those people the mug. I don't have the mug this week.
Look at this mug. Look at this mug. All right.
What is going on there? Is that a cat?
Yeah. It's a Japanese cat, a neko.
Okay.
Yeah. My mom got it for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, and then in the cup, just I'm doing what you did last week. It's just a little bit of tea and honey.
Nice. Got to soothe the throat there with an hour and a half of talking.
Yeah. Keep the questions going,
All right, absolutely. So we got about 15 minutes left. I'm Freedman. He's Chris Allen, getting to your fantasy football questions. If we don't get to them, check out the rankings that we have on the site for free. Check out the start. Let me flip that. The start sit tool that we have for free. I mean, it works either way. Maybe you want to think about it negatively in terms of like, I've got these guys. Who am I sitting? You check out the free tool that we have on the site, and of course, all the content. All right, getting to the tight ends: Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta. Laporta hasn't been this year what he was last year, but at the same time, the tight end position being what it is, hard to bench someone like him, especially when he's in a game environment that could absolutely shoot out Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta. The tool says to go with Laporta. Where are you going?
I'll go with the tool on this one. And for some of the points that we outlined earlier regarding like the Packers, like passing game, whereas like last week, no Dobbs, no Christian Watson. This week should have like Dobbs back, may have Christian Watson back, should not have like any, at least like for anybody that's rostering Dontayvion Wicks, should not have drops from Dontayvion Wicks, requiring Jordan Love to go to Tucker Kraft as often as possible. So it's like all of those things kind of like pull me away from Tucker Kraft. Whereas with Sam Laporta, like we can still see the same type of like up-tempo environment for the Lions going against the Cowboys. But I mean, we know what the weapons are. There shouldn't be any concern about what the target share is going to look like. So I guess I lean a bit more towards Sam Laporta, just given the state of both offenses at this point.
I was muted there. All right. Next question here. Crazy to start Tyrone Tracy over Joe Mixon, PPR. I don't think it is like an unreasonable thing. Mixon coming back from injury, there could be the possibility especially with Dameon Pierce also coming back from injury, the possibility that maybe Mixon doesn't have the full workload that he had prior to injury. Tyrone Tracy, with no Devin Singletary expected, given how good Tyrone Tracy looked last week. You could see easily how Tracy scores more points than Joe Mixon in PPR. Like there are universes in which that happens. That said, I'm probably still going with Joe Mixon, but it's not like absolute slam dunk.
No, I don't think it's crazy at all, because if we saw Tracy both get mixed in as a rusher and somewhat as a passer, like it wasn't like he was earning like Christian McCaffrey level targets or anything along those lines, but at least he's a function or a facet of both pieces of the offense, and that's what you want from a guy that you'd want to consider in a PPR league, especially starting over a workhorse that we know Joe Mixon to be. So while the tool grades Mixon out as the better option, I think going up against the Patriots defense, I think Freedman, you noted earlier how much of a down like a down game like this could be from a scoring standpoint, like I'm kind of with you. Whereas Tracy has the better matchup. We know the workload's going to be there with Singletary expected out. So if you want to lean towards Tracy because the matchup, like your singular matchup, like going up against like the a separate roster, like kind of dictates that. Like I can understand that.
All right. Getting a message from our producer and head of content, Nando, saying that Travis Etienne has fumbled. I mean, look,
F's in the chat, boys.
The analogy that I made in my favorites article this week talking about running backs was that like when you see, I think it was like when you see a mouse in your house and you see it once, like that's maybe something that is just sort of random. If you see it twice, you are now living in the mouse's house. And like Travis Etienne is now living in Tank Bigsby's backfield.
That is
like
correct.
Bigsby is just like running circles around him. If you look at the stat line here, Travis Etienne, 3 carries, -1 rushing yards.
Whew.
It is not a situation anymore where like we can depend on Travis Etienne as fantasy investors, as sad as that is. All right. Should I go with Stroud or Goff? I know Goff did really good, but Stroud has Patriots defense and it's no PPR. All right. So Stroud versus Goff. What are your thoughts on this one?
I would kind of agree with going to like with kind of shading towards Goff like in this matchup. Like while I know that the Lions have been like more run heavy than pass happy, it's just about what the matchup will allow. And with the Cowboys secondary like being somewhat banged up, we talked about our like for Sam Laporta. We haven't even talked about like ARSB, but just like but we talked about like Jameson Williams like earlier. We like the pieces like surrounding Goff. So I think, and we haven't really said much about the Texans passing game. So I think that like our conversation like prior to this question kind of lends itself to us kind of liking Jared Goff a little bit more than CJ Stroud this week.
I have Stroud looking at this, my rankings. I have Stroud at number 15. I have Jared Goff at number 16.
How do these people get these questions where they wind up like right next to each other? It's uncanny.
Well, I mean, look, those are the types of questions where people are going to have the legitimate question.
Yeah.
Who do I start? And so like I think it very much is a coin flip. I like that Goff is in the situation of being indoors in a game that could absolutely shoot out. The thing is the Cowboys are most vulnerable against the run. And so I mean, I love David Montgomery, love Jahmyr Gibbs. I think those guys end up getting the bulk of the fantasy production this week. And maybe that means Jared Goff has like a fine game, an efficient game, but maybe he actually doesn't end up getting all that many in terms of like fantasy points. But Stroud, I don't think he's also going to get all that many fantasy points either, just because of the game environment that he's in, super low scoring. But yeah, given that I have Stroud ranked one spot ahead of Goff, I think I'm going Stroud, but it's not even close to something that is locked in. All right, half PPR. Who should I start as my wide receiver 2? By the way, yes, Etienne fumble overturned. Good for Etienne. He still lives in someone else's backfield. All right, half PPR. Who should I start as my wide receiver 2? Jalen Tolbert, Downs, Slayton. We've talked about all 3 of these guys at different points on the show. Tolbert as someone who impressed last week. Downs is someone who is a little bit of a PPR maven, but could have the downgrade at quarterback with Anthony Richardson coming in. Darius Slayton, boom bust, has had opportunities in the past and done well with them, but in a boom busty kind of way. No Malik Neighbors. Maybe he could be not the number 1 wide receiver. That's going to be, of course, Wan'Dale Robinson, but the number 1 perimeter receiver and big play opportunities could be there going against a Bengals secondary that has just given it up this year. Who are you looking at as your wide receiver 2?
I would list those guys. Like I would go Tolbert, Slayton, and then Downs. Because it's half point PPR, I wouldn't put as much emphasis on Downs and his like short to intermediate pass catching skill set, like as the premier, like as even like a mid tier option, like in that scoring system. So I'd probably go in that order: Tolbert, Slayton, Downs.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. That's probably the order I would go with. Tolbert and Slayton, both like expected to be like the wide receiver 2 within their offense.
Yeah.
Both of them have sort of the exploitable matchups. So I think they're similar in terms of kind of their situations. I prefer Tolbert a little bit more in the game that could shoot out with a 52.5 total versus Darius Slayton in the game with the total of 47. So that's how I'd be going. Gibson or Chase Brown full PPR. Antonio Gibson, good situation in that Ramondre Stevenson is out. Bad situation in that his team is an underdog in a game where very few points are expected to be scored. Chase Brown, I'm probably going with Chase Brown. Just like, I don't know. We've talked about Chase Brown enough, but like it's neck and neck between these two. I'm probably going towards Chase Brown. I just feel like a little bit better with the situation that he's in.
Well, and like our start sit tool will highlight like Gibson as the better option between the two. But I agree with you that it's like we don't know what this offense is going to look like with Drake May under center. And with Drake May, like in his final season at UNC, like he had over like a 10% scrambling rate. So is there a chance that like he winds up taking away opportunities? Let's say like how many times can we expect the Patriots to get into scoring position? And two, once they get into scoring position, does Drake May take away from Antonio Gibson? Like those are legitimate things to think about. Because even when May played during the preseason, I think he ran for at least one touchdown. So it's like looking at the situation, I would downgrade like Gibson's opportunities just a little bit, given May as a rusher. And then with Chase Brown, we already know like where he's at, like in the pecking order for the Bengals. We know that it's like a decent matchup against the Giants. And I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but Kayvon Thibodeau is supposed to be out like this week for the Giants. So that also like gives me at least a bit more confidence in what Brown can do, like from a rushing standpoint as compared to Gibson.
Absolutely love it. All right, I have to drop a player to pick up a defense. Which one am I dropping? Najee, Wandale, or Shaheed? I'll have to start one of the receivers, full PPR. So if you have to start one of the receivers and it is full PPR, then I think you're not dropping Najee. I'm just saying that. Like you're not dropping the guy who's like an RB2 every week who has really strong projectable volume. So then it's Wandale versus Shaheed. Since it's full PPR, I might go with Wandale Robinson. I might start Wandale Robinson and drop Shaheed, who I think has higher upside, but because it's PPR, like even when he goes off, him going off is normally not getting a lot of receptions. It's him normally getting a lot of yards and a touchdown. So I would probably drop Shaheed, as disgusting as that makes me feel, because I want Shaheed on all my teams, but dropping him, I feel like is the right option given the format and the situation you're in.
Oh, I agree. And you could be potentially getting out ahead of things, because we already talked about the downgrade for Spencer Rattler with missing 2 offensive linemen and going against Todd Bowles. With Shaheed also playing outside, next week they played against the Broncos. So Shaheed will potentially see Patrick Surtain. Chargers shortly after that, who the Chargers have been a tough out from a defensive standpoint. So it's like New Orleans without Derek Carr. I mean, you might be getting out ahead of like whatever consternation like Chris Olave, like fantasy managers, like will have whoever else is still rostering Shaheed. I mean, they're like, you might be getting out ahead of that. So I think dropping Shaheed is the right call.
Okay. We're going to do one more question. Nando, give us the one more question. All right, Jaden Reed or Deontay Johnson, and Kyler Murray or Justin Fields. Love it. 2 questions in the form of one question. Jaden Reed, haven't talked about him. He's absolutely someone I'm starting. Just like you could name only maybe 5 wide receivers ahead of him where I'm like, okay, I'm benching Jaden Reed. But Jaden Reed versus Deontay Johnson, in a great offense, even though he's not like the clear alpha in terms of like target volume, he's just so efficient and he's the number 1 guy there. Great matchup, home favorite, Jaden Reed versus Deontay Johnson. That's where I'm going. And then Kyler versus Justin Fields. Justin Fields, we talked about him earlier, has the big not injury risk, the big benching risk now with Russell Wilson being healthy and being behind him as the backup. I think at some point, it could happen in the middle of the game. At some point, Justin Fields will not be the starter for that offense. And then Kyler Murray, a high scoring potential environment at Lambeau with 2 teams kind of going back and forth. Murray, has been boom or bust a little bit this year, but I still think has a higher floor and a higher ceiling than Justin Fields. So that's where I'm going with Murray, going with Jaden. Where are you going, Chris?
Yeah, easy agree there. Jaden Reed is like one of the only Packers receivers where, again, go and check out the utilization score available on FantasyLife.com. Reed's like utilization score in like week 1 with Jordan Love still in the lineup was 7.5, dipped in weeks 2 and 3 like with the quarterback change, and right back up to where it was beforehand. So you can see like with Jordan Love under center, we shouldn't be concerned about having Reed in, on our rosters. And with Kyler Murray, I mean, if he can rip off like 50-yard touchdown runs like on a weekly basis like he did just this past week, great. And also, again, to your point, like we don't have any concerns about the potential benching with Russell Wilson like being healthy with Justin Fields. So it's like I'll go and with those two, they're playing in the same game. Like we like that environment like between the Packers and the Cardinals as well. So like if I want Jaden Reed to be scoring, I'm going to want like Kyler Murray kind of punching back or like being forced to punch back as well. So I think those two, that in-game correlation also speaks well to starting both of them this week.
Yeah, Murray like being 40, 45 yards away from the end zone and
knowing
knowing that he was going to score
yes.
at that point, such a baller move.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, that is awesome. All right, Chris, you got great content on the site. Tell people everything that they should check out.
The wide receiver cornerbacks matchup, if you're looking for any sort of edge as to why you should be starting some guys or not, or like trying to fade a couple of guys here and there, definitely check that out. Injury report tracker. So if you need any last minute help deciding on like which guys like we should potentially pick up or shy away from, like given what we know, that should be live on the site right now as well. Between that, all the shows, I mean, FantasyLife.com. Check out the stuff like the YouTube channel. Obviously, hit the like and subscribe. You'll see my face along with like Ian Hartitz and Paul Charchian like bright and early tomorrow morning. So yeah, like appreciate all the likes and all that. But yeah, continue to subscribe and check out all of our content here.
All right, awesome stuff. You can check out the positional breakdowns that I have for all 4 skill positions from the fantasy perspective, and then for betting, I have my best bets on the site and my favorite player props on the site. You can check out the bet tracker, and then of course check out all the rankings, all the tools that we have at Fantasy Life. We appreciate you tagging along and asking us the questions. He's Chris Allen. I am Matthew Freedman. Have a fantastic week.